Alright everyone, what's up? How you all doing today? Hope everything's going alright out there for you guys. On my end, things are going well, and hearing this music, every time I turn this on and I hear this, I'm always put in a very good mood. Like, it's so soothing, and I'm looking forward to starting this up again. So, if anything guys, hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you all for the love and support, and let's continue on. Alright, and we are back.
いや、自転車には乗ってみたいけど、今回は遠慮するよ。じゃあ、また明日、学校で。
Saying farewell to his co-workers, he headed to the hardware store. He needed a cheap and sturdy bamboo broom and a large dustpan to go with it. If possible, a pushcart and stick for a splint would have been nice too. As it happened, Sojiro wanted quite a few things. Alice returned to her work after waking from her nap. The Kuonji estate had an annex that housed a library. The library was filled with books handed down to her from her mother, so it was Alice's territory such that even Aoko dared not enter. If the mansion was a witch's abode, left behind by the times, the library was a fairy tale quarters lost to the ages. It was a natural sanctuary for the young witch who could command ploys to do her bidding. She relied on her memory to recall the location of each book in the many shelves. And then she saw it. Upon raising her head, she was met with the most unusual of sights. Her elegant eyebrows bristled in distaste. From that moment on, she failed to accomplish anything she had planned for that day. She was instead forced to stare at the strange sight outside her window, eyebrows fixed in that position until the sun set. Ah well. Moving into the grand mansion on the hill had not brought any major changes to Sojiro's day-to-day schedule. He woke up, went to his part-time job, ate breakfast, and went to school. Classes came and went, still strange and new, broken up by rare and brief moments of rest until the school day ended. He left school, went to his part-time job, slept, woke up, and studied for exams. A modest life for a modest young man, continuing every day in the same fashion despite his best efforts to change his fortune. But nothing ever really changes. Whether Aoko was by his side in the mansion, as was frequently the case, or whether Alice was making him drink some potion she prepared before going to bed. The former was an attempt by Aoko to make him feel better. The latter was some attempt to keep him safe even if he did not fully appreciate it. Then, one day, a day like any other, while Sojiro was pouring himself some tea as he worried over the lack of change in his life.
あ、そういえば。
His relationship with Alice was the same as ever, but there was one major change this morning. He was drinking black tea instead of green. Though there were all sorts of different types of tea to be found in the kitchen, a newcomer to the world of tea like Sojiro could not tell one of them from the next. Naturally, his tea-making skills were limited to tea bags, one of which he placed in his cup before returning to the dining table. Alice and Aoko were already seated. The two were eating in silence. In this household, it was everyone for themselves when it came to breakfast. The diplomatic description of their breakfast would be simple. The more accurate description would be 2 slices of stale bread prepared in seconds. Aoko exchanged a word or two with Alice, took a sip of tea, and stood up from her seat. Since it was winter break for the high schooler, she returned to her room after eating as she normally did, while Aoko headed to the front door, shoes in hand, ready for school. After hurriedly cleaning the table, Sojiro rushed out the door after Aoko. Together they walked down the long hill in the direction of school. They had spent 3 days following this very simple routine.
ところで あれから動きはあった？
School had ended and evening had arrived. Buttered bread roll in one hand, Alice replied with a simple, silent shake of her head.
そう。ならあっちも次の手を考えているんでしょうね。魔術師本体の居場所は見当ついてる？
Her response was exactly the same. Without showing the slightest sign of dejection, she continued to chew the roll and took a stab of her salad.
そう。私も試験が終わったら手伝うから、それまで悪いけど一人でやってて。今日からあのバカを一夜漬けにしなくちゃいけないんで余裕ないの。
Alice's face grew dour as if she had something to get off her chest.
問題ないでしょ？アリスはもう休みに入ってるんだから、一日全部使えるじゃない。
Alice was indeed on vacation and could spend all day, every day on her work as a mage. Yet she had spent the past few days holed up in the library instead. She was hardly devoting herself to dealing with the challenger, as Aoko put it.
アリス？聞いてる？
わかってる。今夜からそっちもやるから。
Sighing, she stood up. What was bothering Alice, and what was it she wanted to say? What had she been doing only 2 hours earlier? I would like to know that too. The young witch took her leave from the breakfast table without offering a single clue. Misaki High was a private school, and as such, its winter break started earlier than public schools. The end of the term ceremony was in mid-December, followed by a brief respite before the next term began. Of course, that was if, and only if, they overcame the classic obstacle lying between them and an extended break from school: final exams. The radio continued its broadcast late into the night. A thermos of hot tea eliminated the need to venture down to the kitchen. An electric blanket kept away the winter cold, and a crab-shaped pastry staved off any dinnertime hunger. These were the lengths Aoko had gone to. She needed to ensure that every aspect of her surroundings helped her pull a successful all-nighter.
期末試験1日目、ご苦労様。それで、生まれ変わる覚悟はできた？
Sojiro nodded earnestly. Upon returning from work, he encountered not the mage she expected, but the Demon Student Council president, Aozaki. Half a day earlier. The first day of exams were over, and Sojiro was about to head back to the mansion where he hoped to put his plan into practice when...
今夜、私の部屋で監禁ね。あ、夕方からのアルバイトは当然キャンセル。ちょっと本気であの点数はありえないから。
A cold blue grin greeted him in the hallway. Clenched in her fist was Sojiro's exam paper. Mr. Yamashiro had no doubt said,
ま、転校してきたばかりだし、しょうがないよね。
But she had snatched the exam out of the teacher's hands the minute he tried to show her. That was how Sojiro had ended up in Aoko's room instead of the room in the attic to which she was accustomed. Though her situation was far from normal, at the end of the day, she was an adolescent girl like any other. Naturally, she felt uncomfortable letting a boy her own age into her room. However, his grades were truly something that called for desperate measures. That explained why her mood was even worse than normal today, and the vein on her forehead was pulsing visibly with anger.
先に自分の復習済ませる。あんたはそのテーブル使ってて。
Aoko turned her back to him and sat down at her favorite desk. Sojiro was left standing before a cheap, looking glass table.
なんかいろいろと慣れないな。なあ、青崎。この青いのなんだ？
Restless, Sojiro found his eyes drawn to the guitar propped up in the corner.
なんか薄いし青いし、とんがってるし。きっと青崎のことだし。もしかしなくても、武器か。
楽器よそれ。エレキはともかく、アコギは音楽室で似たようなのあったでしょ？あとこれ以上青々言ったら、そのとんがってるので殴るからね。
Yeah, there's no need for that. Sojiro plopped himself down onto the cushion, struggling to suppress the desire to retort that it was a weapon after all.
ちょっとは落ち着きなさいよ。いつもは耳の遠い大型犬みたいに鈍感なくせに。
In fact, it was Aoko who was oblivious for once. For his part, Sojiro could not figure out why he felt so restless either. Suffice it to say, they were both pretty clueless in this moment.
もしかして内装？この部屋の家具のグレードが今とは違うから不思議がってるのね。ここ、ベッド以外は私の家から持ち込んだものなの。引っ越してから2年経つけど、まだ屋敷には馴染んでないでしょ。
Though she misunderstood the real reason for Sojiro's nervousness, Aoko seemed satisfied that she had resolved Sojiro's anxiety for the time being and returned to her studies. She flipped through her notes and textbooks as if fast-forwarding a tape. There was no opening for an outsider like him to intrude in her high-speed study session. Repelled by her intensity, he retreated to his table. He was at least sensitive enough to pick up on her desire to be left alone. It was a testament to Sojiro that having his needs utterly ignored was now second nature to him, to the extent that he could now happily go about his business in solitude. Two hours passed. Then, as the clock neared 11, Aoko's speed and concentration began to slip. Seeing his window of opportunity, Sojiro seized the moment to strike up a conversation.
青崎、ちょっといいかな。
何？
She spoke hesitantly, not bothering to turn to face him. She continued to flip the pages of her textbook, albeit at a slower speed than before.
この3日間、青崎たちの夕食事情を見てきたけど、君たちの食事はいつもああなのか？
そうだけど、おかしい？
そう言われると困るな。ただ学校じゃみんな楽しそうだった。誰かと食事をとるってことはああいう風になることだって思ってた。だからもしかすると。
もしかしないわよ。別にあんたのせいでアリスと話さないわけじゃないわ。私たちはいつもああだから。
Aoko spoke calmly with her back still turned, seemingly unaware of what he was getting at.
張り詰めた食卓だな。青崎とアリスは仲がいいと思ってたのに。
She neither confirmed nor denied his statement. She was, however, surprised by the disappointed tone in which he had made it.
ま、張り詰めた食卓っていうのは合ってるわね。アリスが何回あんたの飲み物にメスカリンを入れてたかなんてもう覚えてないし、昨日なんか堂々とサラダの中に7かまどなんか混ざってるし。ほんと、あの子何考えてるんだろう。
A bitter smile spread across her face in reminiscence. The pages of her textbook continued to turn.
メスカリン？
サボテンから取れるアルカロイドよ。アリスが使う以上、ただの幻覚剤じゃないでしょうけどね。と、私はこんなもんでいっか。
With that, she slammed shut her fourth textbook of the night. After having scarcely changed position the whole night, she finally turned in her chair to face him.
さあ、今度はあんたを仕込まなくちゃね。今日の4科目の答案、実に宗十郎らしい出来栄えでそっと押しそうになったわ、私。
Her tone was light, but her gaze was heavy as she stared at Sojiro, seated cross-legged on the floor.
原告、地理、数学、電子工学。あの調子であと2日続けたら、冬休みが消えるのは当然でしょうね。そうなると、困るのは私なのよ、実際。
I'm honestly more surprised that they have a subject called electronics. Everything else seems on par.
いや俺も困るぞ。休みなのに学校に行くのはなんか気が乗らない。
Sojiro calmly corrected her.
そりゃあ私のセリフだ。あんたが学校に行くってことは必然こっちまでとばっちりが来るっての。
All she could think about, as much as she tried not to, was Mr. Yamashita and his annoying grin.
それ以前に私の目が黒いうちはオール赤なんてやつは許さない。本来なら少年から叩き直すところだけど、ま、あんたはいろいろ事情があるからとりあえず点数だけで勘弁してあげる。 私もテストは一夜漬けで片付ける方だから、あんた一人仕込むのにそう時間はかからないだろうし。
Sojo's expression openly soured in response to her declaration. It was obvious he did not think he needed her meddling in his studies.
あんたね、苦労するのは私とあなた、どっちだと思う？
Sojiro got the feeling that it would be him, but he nodded slowly nonetheless. Then again, it would probably take more effort on her part than on his, and in any case, he knew there was no way to talk her out of it.
この度はご迷惑をおかけします。
Sojiro summarily bowed his head to show gratitude and willingness to work.
よろしい。安心なさい。私だって鬼じゃないから。別に平均点狙うってわけでもなし。予定通りこなしていけば3時には眠れるわよ。
Oh, why thank you. That's very gracious. She nodded with satisfaction, pleased by his studious attitude. He had plenty of obstacles ahead of him, but that sense of humility might be enough to see him through.
って何仏心出してるんだ私。いい？しずきくん。この後頼られちゃたまんないから釘刺しておくけど、私がマンツーマンで誰かを仕込むなんてことめったにないから。
Didn't you just call him by his first name earlier? Why did she revert back?
これはあくまで異例中の異例だって覚えておいてね。
She spoke more to convince herself than him, but his expression still darkened. It made one want to hang a sign around his neck that read, "Please take me home," like an abandoned pet. Aoko chided herself for being so soft. For some reason, in that moment, she recalled that it had been raining that day they met each other. Time passed like the falling grains of an hourglass.
結局
They really did spend an all-nighter, huh? Aoko squinted as light poured through the window, and she downed another cup of tea. She had lost count of exactly how many she had drank long ago.
一晩かかったね、大崎。
Sojiro picked up on what she left unspoken. Aoko had used up all her pep in staying up all night, but also in shouting at him. He looked pale and uncomfortable, just as he had all night long.
ええ、甘く見てたわ、あんたのことを。
だから褒めても何も出ないって。
ある意味褒めるに値するかもね。
She was at the end of her rope, but she could not help the bit of pride that swelled up in her. His lack of even the most basic comprehension was shocking, even taking into account his upbringing in the wilderness. His ability was that of a middle school student, and that was being generous. Preparing him for exams by teaching him new concepts and ideas was a waste of time. Rote memorization was his only hope for passing. Everything he memorized could collapse like a house of cards afterwards for all she cared, so long as he remembered for his exams. Assuming he had the capacity to be a good student in the first place had been her mistake. It took all night to cover the content for just 4 exams, and she still did not feel confident he could apply what he so earnestly tried to memorize.
でもね、真面目なのはいいことだけど、あんた暗記するのに時間かかりすぎ。
そこは多めに見てほしい。今まで頭より体で覚えることのが多かったんだ。
Aoko let out an exasperated sigh. Naturally, physical prowess mattered more in mountain life than the intellectual kind, but still.
まあいいわ。これで山城からあんたの成績について相談されることもないでしょうし。紅茶、もう一杯入れてくれる？
Sojiro stood up and obeyed as Aoko stretched her aching back. She had apparently bought the tea bags in bulk, so there were still plenty to use.
まったく無駄遣いだな、青崎は。
He spoke under his breath so she wouldn't hear. It made him somehow happy to see her so tired and unfocused after the grueling all-night lesson she had given him. It did not cross his mind that the excess tea bags, far from being an indulgent purchase, were purchased intentionally to sustain them through the night. A relaxed expression came across Aoko's face as she watched him, naive and peaceful as could be.
悪くないけど、せめてリーフティーで入れられるように仕込まなくちゃダメかな。
Seeming to have overheard her not-so-inner monologue, Sojiro made to face her.
やっぱり味は違うのか？
違う違う、もう全 然。正直私はどうでもいいんだけど、アリスはね、かなりお茶にはうるさいよ。そうだ、宗十郎、アリスとうまくいってる？
Aoko cheerfully slumped over the table, now covered with textbooks and scribbled notes. Sojiro watched her with a hint of resentment in his eyes.
彼女と会えるのは食事の時だけで、食事と言ったらあれだろ？どうやって仲良くなれって言うんだ。
そう？私は十分脈ありだと思ったけど。そっちはアリスを怖がってないし、アリスはそっちを追い出す理由を見つけようと躍起になってるし。いい条件よ、これって。
全然わからないな。あの子とこっちの関係は遊園地前の青崎と俺の関係と同じじゃないか。一体どこがいい条件なんだ？
とりあえず反目し合ってはいないでしょ。一方通行の関係だけど、それはそれ。アリスにしちゃ上出来っていうか、理由を探している時点で可能性ありってね。あの子は反感に応えることが癖になっちゃってるから、大抵相手を自滅させちゃうのよ。
Her ominous words only confused Sojiro further.
知ってしまえば単純な話なんだけどね、あの子の場合。ただ、
Whether or not he could put it into practice was another story altogether.
難しいよ、青崎は。
He carried their teacups back to the table as he spoke. Aoko picked hers up and took a sip as if to dispel her exhaustion.
でも、確かに君の言う通りだ。俺はまだあの子の顔しか知らない。クオンジ・アリスという名前すら定かじゃないのは問題があるね。
He followed Aoko's lead and took a sip of his own. His cup contained not tea but plain hot water.
あの子のこと教えてほしい？
Aoko scrutinized him carefully as she sat. Most boys would have been captivated by her gaze in that moment.
いや、そういうことは本人に聞いてあげるべきだと思う。
But he ignored her and stared straight ahead as if speaking directly to Alice herself.
そうね。ほんと、あんたってアリス好みの対応をするわ。ねえ、前から気になってたけど、客室でアリスに何を言ったの？いくら私との約束とはいえ、あの子が部外者を半日も放置するなんてありえないのよ。
He thought back to that moment. He could recall only 2 or 3 words he had exchanged with Alice after awakening in the guest room. He didn't recall the conversation being anything special, but he could not bring himself to casually share it with Aoko now. After all.
ねえ、どんなセリフであの子の気を変えたの？
Aoko eagerly pressed him for answers. Sojiro frowned, unsure of what to say. He did not know what the interaction had been like for Alice, but for him it had felt special, sacred almost. The question was, why and for whom was he so concerned?
ほら、白状しなさいってば。隠し事なんて似合わないわよ。
Her disconcerting smile moved even closer. Sojiro did not look like he was able to stay silent much longer. As he would eventually come to realize, Aoko Aozaki had sometimes troubling propensity to gossip.
まあ、あの子と何を話したかは言わないけど、今の青崎に比べれば花もロマンもなかったのだけは確かかな。さっきまでは青崎が鬼みたいだったからいいもんだなって気がつかなかった。
He stared directly into her eyes as he spoke. Aoko nearly leapt out of her seat in panic. Now that he pointed out, she realized their bodies were practically touching.
仕方ないでしょ。この方が効率良かったんだから。あんた、横にいないとすぐ間違えるし。
Aoko stood up as she lashed back at him.
そうだね。なんか昔みたいで久しぶりに集中できた。これが異例中の異例っていうのが本当に残念だ。
余裕あるじゃない。その分じゃ今日のテストだけじゃなく、アリスとの話し合いもうまくいきそうね、宗十郎。
ああ、それはもちろん。
His cool response caught her off guard, and for a moment she was at a loss for words. She meant it sarcastically, and yet he responded with a warm smile.
方針変更だ。まずは近くで話しかけてみるよ。嫌なことはいずれ終わるって分かったから。
Yeah, just do it your way, bro. Aoko remained in a state of silent shock as he spoke and rose to his feet. She could not help but feel a reluctant respect for what seemed to be his newfound confidence and competence.
とりあえず今日は一人で帰ってアリスと話してみる。青崎は放課後生徒会だろ？
He was right. It was their last meeting before the winter break. Normally, he would have waited until the meeting ended or else gone straight to his part-time job. This part of Aoko's plan was to make sure he and Alice were never alone in the mansion together.
待った。まさかあんた、一人でアリスとやり合うつもりなの？
別にやり合うつもりはないぞ。し合っても勝てないだろう、アリスには。
His reply made complete sense, which floored her.
でも、青崎がいたら話が複雑になるのは目に見えてるんだ。そんなわけで、今日はゆっくり飛び丸の相手でもしててくれ。
You know, it's even funnier that he doesn't know that what he's saying is gonna unintentionally tick her off.
本気？
He felt like he was being tested but nodded nonchalantly nonetheless. Knowing how grave the situation really was, Aoko was not sure how to respond to his apparent lack of concern. The morning light coming through the window marked a stark contrast between the two, which stood bathed in light, which lurked in darkness. That went without saying. The silence lasted for only a brief moment. Staring at him gravely, she said,
そう。なら止めはしないわ。
That was all she had. Her dry tone hid the significance of their pregnant silence, not revealing the slightest sign of discord.
なんか怒ってないか、青崎。
別に。それで何か考えはあるの？下手な考えは通じないわよ、あの子には。
Shojiro furrowed his brow in deep thought. He knew it would be hard to get close to her through talk alone. In fact, it felt nearly impossible.
言葉で落ちないやつは物で釣れ。
Kinomi had been the voice of wisdom and folly for him countless times in the past. Incidentally, Kinomi had been referring to Aoko at the time he shared that pearl of wisdom. But Sojiro had had this distinct impression that trying to buy Aozaki's kindness with gifts would not end well.
だいたいアリスの趣味もわからないじゃないか。考えてみると、今の自分と彼女はまるで接点がない。
Sojiro crossed his arms at a loss.
いつものことだけど、何も考えてなかったわけね。
うん。でもまあ、あれこれ考えなくてもいいと思う。アリスにはあれこれ説明するとか、分かってもらおうとか、そういうんじゃなくて、なんていうか。
He pondered intently as he tried to put his vague thoughts into something concrete, but he did not spend much time in thought. With a nod, he concluded.
要は、俺が彼女を好きかどうかってことじゃないか？
He articulated that which is often so hard to say with surprising clarity and calm. It was certainly a prerequisite for the task he hoped to achieve. He had no hope of making her appreciate him with words, or with acts of giving with the expectation of reciprocation. He simply wished to get to know her better because he liked her. That was his honest, uncontrived intention, and it reflected the purity of his heart. But whether that was in his best interest or not was another story altogether. Calculation and compromise, selfishness and conflict. Purity such as his often irritated people who believed that morals went against human nature. Or rather, people who were inevitably forced to believe it. Aoko silently walked away without responding to what Sojiro said. Her long hair swung from side to side as she passed him.
青崎？
Noting her strangely cold manner, he called out to her. However, she was already opening the door to leave.
下でシャワー浴びてくるから、あなたは自分の部屋に戻ってて。
Her words lacked any expressive inflection. In his confusion, all Sojiro could do was nod.
いいけど、やっぱり怒ってないか、青崎。
Emotion returned to her face as he spoke. Yet it was not the typical irritated look to which she had grown so accustomed.
そうね。あんた流に言えば、多分私は怒ってる。
Alright guys, I'm going to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. When we come back, I'm going to continue on and see how Sojiro fares against the fair Alice.